Welcome to 3 Yards Per Carry, a podcast covering the Miami Dolphins and the NFL. Now, here's your hosts, Chris, Alf, and Simon.
And we're on, and welcome to another edition of 3 Yards Per Carry, another in our draft series. We're talking offensive line today. I'm Alfredo Arteaga. Simon Clancy is here. Chris Kaufman is here. And as always, this show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use promo code 5, F-I-V-E. You deposit $100. It's a one-time rollover. They give you $100. So it's essentially a free $100. Take it. Promo code F-I-V-E. Go to betteredge.com/5reasons, the number 5 reasons, and you get $25 just for signing up. All right. Dolphins have 2 picks on day 2. Now, if they come out of this draft with an offensive lineman, we're talking offensive lineman on this show. If they come out of this draft with an offensive lineman and they took him in the 7th or 6th round, they obviously weren't very serious about addressing the issue. So I guess we're mostly going to be talking about those guys, those top 100 guys that could be reached by the Dolphins with pick 51 and I believe 84. So we'll start here. Simon, do they go into this draft, or do you go, more importantly, your opinion, do you go into this draft thinking to yourself, one of those picks or a trade down of some sort that nets you another top 100 pick must be used on that offensive line, either tackle or guard? Your opinion.
Look, we know what they need to do. They need a left guard and they need a right tackle, but they've shown zero interest in doing it. In free agency, it's not a particularly good draft on the offensive line, and at 51, you find yourself in an area where you're probably going to miss out on the best, guard prospects. So Peter Skoronski, whether you're kicking him inside or not, Osiris Torrance, and then certainly the best tackles with the guys that we've talked about ad infinitum since we've been doing this, whether that's Paris Johnson or Broderick Jones or Darnell Wright or Anton Harrison or probably Dawan Jones. They're guys that are just going to be out of our reach. So you're going to find yourself in a position where you're going to either end up reaching for a guy or, and the critical position to me is right tackle. And I just don't see, people talk about, there's this guy and there's that guy. And these guys are all left tackles, and you're asking them to make a transition to the right side, which is incredibly difficult. It's not nearly as easy as people think. So I think if you're going to take an offensive lineman, I think the one player that really stands out for me that I think probably will be in the area is a guy like Steve Avila of TCU, who played center, can play left guard, doesn't fix the right tackle issue. And maybe that comes later on with a guy. I don't know who it would be, but it could be a Tyler Steen, the kid from Alabama. You could look at Warren McClendon of Georgia. It could be Carter Warren of Pittsburgh. They're like Braden Daniels of Utah, Wanya Morris of Oklahoma. I think that they are. It's Austin Jackson or be damned. I think, Chris, don't you think? As much as we hate it, it feels like that's what they're still going to give these guys the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and you had the right words. As much as we hate it, and that unfortunately that does seem, part of me still wonders, and maybe this is just the hope springs eternal thing. Part of me wonders if they've just been sitting on top of the information, or just sitting on top of what they're going to do and not allowing anybody to know. Not allowing agents to know, not allowing, just keeping this of utmost secrecy. Simply, and if you think about it, the table is set for this draft in much the same way as it was set in 2014. I was talking about this on Twitter, and talking a little bit with Omar Kelly about it. In 2014, on paper anyway, you look at the team and everything was pretty much set. Through free agency and otherwise at virtually every position. You could maybe argue that they needed a wide receiver 3 behind Mike Wallace and Brian Hartline. And indeed, we were all talking about guys like Allen Robinson. They ended up drafting Jarvis Landry in the 2nd round. But the absolutely 100% glaring hole that everybody was staring straight at was at right tackle. Like, they didn't even have a guy to play there. I think it was going to be either Nate Garner or Jason Fox. Everybody else, you go across the team, corners, safeties, all levels of the defense and the offense. They seem to have everything fit except for right tackle, and it was so glaring and so obvious that even Steve Ross, I think I recall that he straight up admitted that they're going to be drafting one in the first round.
Mhm.
You know, like when do you ever see that? Right? But he did, and I remember he was quoted in a local newspaper saying something to that effect. And of course, in that draft, they got Jawan James toward the end of the first round. This is a lot like that because I think you look across the team, and a lot of people are like, okay, well, they could use a tight end, I guess, and that's true. A left guard. You and I, Simon, you just mentioned Steve Avila. That would make a great pick, in my opinion. Yes, we could probably use a left guard, but also Chris Guerrero just called Liam Eichenberg one of their core players. So who knows what they think about. And in his defense, to be honest, he only made the transition to guard last year. Liam Eichenberg did. It was that first year they still had him playing a tackle. They may have intended to try and get him some guard work, but it never worked out in his first year. And I think that there's a lot of history that you can show, like even scientifically, you could show that across large populations of data, the guys that convert from tackle to guard, they end up in a good place, but they start significantly below where the guys that were guards in college and then were asked to play guards in the pros where they are. So like that rookie year or that first year transitioning from tackle to guard is often very rough. And that was Liam Eichenberg's first year. So if the part of me that's like hope springs eternal, maybe Liam Eichenberg might be decent. That's the thing that I seize on. But anyway, like the glaring hole again is right tackle. And so if you're picking at 51 overall and your glaring hole is at right tackle, I think you would want to keep things ultra close to the chest. You know what I mean? Because your entire like filling this glaring hole depends on an appropriate guy falling all the way to pick 51, right? And there aren't that many of them, right? So so you would have to play it. You would have to play it real tight. That's the part of me that's like hopeful. On the other hand, they've shown zero acknowledgement, zero that this is an urgent issue, and that's the part of that Simon that you're addressing. That's like it just seems like Austin Jackson or bust, most likely bust. So that's discouraging. But at the same time, if you and I were to put on our hat, and Alf, if you were to put on your GM hat and say, forget what they're showing, forget what they're signaling, forget anything.
Blue golf hat with a very nondescript logo on it.
Yeah, that would be the one. And forget what they're showing, forget what they might be thinking, all that stuff. We would all take one, right? We would all target somebody. It doesn't have to, as you say, it could be Steve Avila on the offensive line. He could take 1,000 snaps of left guard and really help the situation. Or it could be if the right tackle falls to you, but we would take one. And otherwise, I don't know what they're going to do though. And they've, to their credit, I guess they've done a pretty good job of the whole, the counter surveillance thing of not letting anybody know what's on their mind at these picks, because we are all over the place. We're talking about defensive tackles. We're talking about left guard. We're talking about right tackle. We're talking about running back. We're talking about tight end. We're talking about a wide receiver like Jonathan Mingo.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about everybody and everywhere and everything. Barry Jackson was recently talking about corner as one.
That struck me as way too much smoke already.
Yeah, but it's like he's talking about corner now, and if you think about the age of both, where they are on their career arc, Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard, that would even make some sense, and just like we talked about with defensive tackle, with the fact that the 3 interior defensive linemen that we have are all set to be free agents in 24. That would make sense. And everybody always talks about linebacker too. So we don't know Jack. At some point we have to step back and say, we don't know. And that's where I think we are right now.
All right. Before we go and talk about the very, very, very top of this class for a very brief moment. If they do target an offensive tackle with that 51st pick, I would consider it kind of, I wouldn't call it dumb, but I would call it not very smart, considering that Terrence Steele is 25 years old. He would essentially be a very expensive second round pick because you're going to have to pay him something. Okay. I don't think you're going to bring him on for what Dallas is offering him. I think it's the only move. If they're going to sit at 51 and just say, okay, this is what's left. And they'll sell it as, we had this guy with a first round grade. We had DeJuan Jones with a first round grade. Okay, great. That's nice. That's nice that you had him with a first round grade. Who's a first round grade? Terrence Steele. If they do go out and get an offensive tackle, they just sit there at 51 because I don't believe, man, even at 84, I don't think it's a serious attempt to fix the situation. Okay.
That's tough.
All right. At 51, okay, they tried. Like, this is their attempt. If that's their attempt, isn't the only move moving that pick for Terrence Steele? Simon,
well,
you would agree?
No, I mean he tore his ACL and damaged his PCL on December the 16th. So, I mean, there's a chance he's not even going to be ready for the start of the season. So
they say he's ready for camp. They say.
Well,
they always say that.
Cowboys.
Who's they, Alf?
Cowboys. Dallas
well,
Cowboys.
Of course the Cowboys do. They're in a position.
No, it's like his agent and everything. They always say
the agent. Yeah, of course, the agent doesn't have a vested interest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to happen. I think the one thing that you sit here and we talk about this situation, the one thing that they could do is they could just load up on more offensive weapons. Do you know what I mean? This window is open now. They could just their plan could be, you know what? Let's fuck it. Let's just sign Devon A-Chain and Tank Dell. I'm just throwing those two names out there as absolute speedsters, or Tyler Scott or whoever. Let's just sign two guys who we know we're going to put on the field. They're just going to blow people away with their speed. We're just going to get them in the game, and just add to, try cover A-Chain when you're trying to cover Hill and Waddle and, X, Y, and Z down the field. So they might do that. I mean, I just don't see. I don't think the Terrence Steele thing has ever been really a deal that they were going to make because of the injury. I just don't think you got any guarantee that the guy's going to be healthy for the start of the season. We all know what happens, players coming back off serious knee injuries, especially guys that are 300 plus pounds. It's not easy for them to you almost need a year for them to get back in the game, and the Dolphins just don't have a year. So no, I don't think that's the Terrence Steele thing is going to happen, and I don't think that Green Bay would allow Josh Nijman to walk either. So I don't think either of those deals are going to happen.
Well, and I'll take Alf, how much the both of us have been talking about the Terrence Steele. As Simon says, we're trying to manifest it. I'm with you there, but the devil's advocate on that is, okay, how do you know Dallas is going to let him go? Because if you sign him to an offer sheet and you show your hand that way, first off, you have to have the cap room for the offer sheet.
Yes.
Immediately, because that money gets set aside for the next 5 days until the Dallas Cowboys decide whether to match or not. How do you know that the Dallas Cowboys are gonna let it go? They are today in a better cap situation than we are. And so that makes it, if this becomes a contest of, but we're going to sign them to a contract that is unpleasant for you to sign, to match, they're going to win that game because they're in a better position than we are. So, there's that. And then there's also the other thing that maybe it's just so unpleasant that we don't want to think about it. But Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Waddle, Robert Hunt, Connor Williams, Christian Wilkins, Zach Sealer, Raekwon Davis, Javon Holland in the secondary.
Jalen Phillips.
Jalen? Yeah, almost forgot him. Jalen Phillips. All of these guys are up for new deals or extensions. Let's call it within some maybe immediately, like Christian Wilkins, but within the next 12 to 24 months, something like that.
Brandon Jones.
Yeah, because a bunch of them, well, but I don't think that's a premium contract. I think so because a lot of these guys, a lot of these guys are premium type of players that are going to be coming off the third year. That's when you give them the extension, right? So, so I think that all these guys within the next 12 to 24, how much APY is that? Do you think between all of those players, somewhere between 150 and 200 million?
Yeah,
add it all up.
yeah.
And if you think about it that way, then you could start to see why it makes sense that the Dolphins never even considered or never seriously went for a Mike McGlinchey or Caleb McGarry or any of those free agents at right tackle, and why they probably can't go for a Terrence Steele, probably can't go for a Yosh Neiman either, because they've got within the next 12 to 24 months, they're going to have to dish out like 150 to 200 per year of new contract. Like it's astounding to think about. It's a staggering figure. So I think that something that we may not want to think about as fans, but that they're forced to think about as general managers and people who run the personnel department is maybe they literally just can't. As Simon always says, the salary cap doesn't matter until it matters, and then it really matters.
Yep.
So they might have to be thinking of it that way, and that may be why exactly why in the end, at the end of the day, they just can't consider the Terrence Steele thing, and they've got to try and cheapen it. They've got to try and take care of this position in a cheap way, with a rookie contract. And that may be in the end. If they take, say for example, draft weekend comes up and they trade a future pick plus, whatever at 51 to move up and take a right tackle. We go back and forth on DeJuan Jones or somebody like that. Well, then you look back on it and it will have made a lot of sense that way, right?
Yep.
Because even the secrecy will have made a lot of sense, because they've just got too much money to dish out over the next 12 to 24 months. And they have to go find something, a cheap option.
All right. Now, very, very briefly before we go to break and we talk about what Miami will be doing with that 51st pick as it pertains to the offensive line, if they do something with that 51st pick. The very top of this draft, like, it's not a great class, but is it as simple as Broderick Jones, Darnell Wright? That's the best. And those are basically bookends and guys that will be in the league for 10 plus years. Like, that's the top of the class. You agree, Simon?
No, I think Paris Johnson is right up there. The kid from Ohio State. I think he's a terrific player. I think he's got some. Yeah, he's young. He's a baby. I think he's just 21. He's got some bad habits, technique a little bit, but he's incredibly athletic. He's very fluid. He's very quick. He looks like a perfect kind of zone scheme tackle. I like Jones. Obviously, he's long, 6'5", 311. Again, similar age. I just think he's a bit more raw. Actually, I think Skoronski to me is probably the best. I just think he's so battle tested. You can play him in multiple positions, inside, outside. I think he's got real caliber as a guard. Obviously, we'll like Darnell Wright, what he did with Will Anderson, but actually, it wasn't just Will Anderson. You go and watch him play Miles Murphy. You watch him against Nolan Smith. I think technique can go awry sometimes with him, but he's nasty as hell. He's got incredible power. He's very controlled. He wins as a run blocker, and in the pass game, I just think he's a plug and play day one starting right tackle. And I think it was no surprise to see Mel Kiper had him going ninth to the Bears in his mock draft this morning, because I think the league is significantly higher on him even than we are. And I think he'll go extremely high because, like I said, he's a guy that you can just plug in first day. They can pair him next to the kid that we talked about trading for last season, whose name escapes me, who they moved to right guard and had a really strong season. And with the free agents they brought in, Braxton Jones obviously played really well as a rookie on the left side there for Chicago. I think that's a perfect fit. But yeah, I don't necessarily think that Broderick Jones is the top guy. And look, there's some interior guys as well. We talked about Avila. I think there's a really strong centre class actually, in terms of there's some really good caliber players, whether that's Luke Whippler at Ohio State, whether it's Joe Tippmann at Wisconsin, obviously the kid at Minnesota, Schmitz, who I think is a really solid player. Vila can obviously play center as well, that we've talked about. Ricky Stromberg, the kid at Arkansas. So, and even the guy that the Dolphins really like, Scruggs of Penn State. And we haven't even talked about the Remington Award winner, Oliver Teamy, who played really well at Michigan last season. So I think there's some good caliber interior linemen as well. But to me, Skoronski, Paris Johnson, and Darnell Wright are the kind of the cream of the crop.
Chris?
Yeah, I think as you would get from the question and then Simon's answer, no, obviously it's not that simple. I mean, I don't believe it is, because I think that there's a hell of a lot to be said for Peter Skoronski. But then obviously that's not simple when he's got 32-inch arms, and he's 6'4" and has 32 and only a quarter-inch arms. I mean, there's a lot of data backing that up, and I know that does make NFL teams nervous.
Which, by the way, has Lance Zierlein comparing him to Zach Martin, and will play.
Yes, he does.
Will have him play in that role.
I mean,
let's face it, if you take a Hall of Famer in the top 10, that's not a bad pick.
If you thought if you thought you were drafting Zach Martin, I mean, you'd run up to the podium and
absolutely
right. No, that's right. But I think that Paris Johnson is a really good tackle. I actually like him more than Broderick Jones. I like Darnell Wright more than all. I think that he's the top tackle in the class. I'm being honest about it. And there's a thing about this right tackle position that I kind of wonder about, because, and Simon, you bring this up a lot about the move from left tackle to right tackle and how it's not always a sure thing, right? It's some of the guys, they're like, you try writing with your left hand all of a sudden after you've been writing with your right hand for as long. And then other guys I know, because I've heard them talk about it, they're just like, no, it's the same thing. You just go over there and play. And so it's very prospect dependent. Some guys it's nothing at all. Some guys it's a very big deal. So I think that because of that, though, all these guys that come out, the good ones are left tackles, and I wonder, there's not enough good right tackles in this league, and we kind of ran into this in free agency too. And so I almost wonder if, that even makes a guy like Darnell Wright, who played right tackle, you would play him at right tackle in the NFL if you need one. If you do need a left tackle, I suppose you could try and move him. But I almost wonder if it makes him a little a tidbit more valuable. When I watched him the first time, I was just like, what did Penei Sewell have that this guy doesn't? And I'm not saying that they're the same exact type of player. I'm saying that, just overall in caliber. And so that's why, when I first watched him, I'm like, how is this not the best tackle in the draft? The idea of him going possibly even top 5, I've always said it's going to be first round, and it's not just first round, it's top half of the first round. That's where I think Darnell Wright goes. That's why I keep trying to tell people, no, the Dolphins aren't going to get crack at him at 51. No, they will not get a crack at him, even if they try to trade up. They don't have the ammunition to trade up that high. He's not on the board. Get him out of your mind. So I think it's kind of, to me, at the tackle position, because of that, it's kind of like Darnell Wright, and then some other guys that have a few more ifs to them, and that's. I don't think it's going to be a bad class in the end of the day. I don't know exactly which positions everybody's going to shake out to, though, because there's a lot of that in this draft. There's a lot of, he's a good player, but he seems like he might be best as like a really good player at guard, something along those lines. So I think that Darnell Wright, chief of the class tackle, and then some good players, but good players with some ifs.
All right, we're going to go to break. And when we come back from break, we're going to try to use pick 51 and pick 84 and try to fix the Dolphins offensive line for the next 10 years. But first, these words.
Good luck.
Do you have a water leak and can't find where it's coming from? Are you dealing with water or mold damage in your home or business? Then call Water Cleanup of Florida at 954-579-0356 for immediate assistance. With over 60 years of combined experience, Michael, Robert, and their team is prepared to handle all types of leak detection issues, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. After the leak has been located and repaired, Water Cleanup of Florida will then clean, dry, and fully restore the damaged areas. Water Cleanup of Florida is fully licensed, insured, and certified to provide the one-stop shopping that busy homeowners and business owners require. There is no need to bring in other contractors. They will handle the entire project from start to finish. Service areas include Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. Call Michael anytime on his personal cell phone at 954-579-0356. That's 954-579-0356. Or visit their website at wcufl.com. Water Cleanup of Florida. If you have the schmutz, they have the guts.
I'm Jalen Phillips, and you're listening to 3 Yards Per Carry.
And we're back. All right, pick 51's here. And you're sitting around and you're like, okay, I'm going to take an offensive lineman. And look, the more I look at this guy, I'm thinking to myself, he might not make it there because he has that, I don't know, he has that plug and play look. At least he looks really good to me. That's Steve Avila, guard out of TCU. I don't know if he'll make it to 51, but let's say in this hypothetical he does. I do believe DeJuan Jones has a real opportunity at making it to 51. And let's say that that's the direction you're going. DeJuan Jones is either going to be the Dolphins' right tackle or Steve Avila is going to be the Dolphins' starting left guard. Simon, you're on the clock. What are you doing? And can you compare these two players at their respective positions?
Oh, I mean, they're totally different. I mean, look, Jones, I don't love Jones. I know Chris is a big fan. He's young. He's only 21 and a half. And look, extraordinary frame. I saw him described as, having the wingspan of a Boeing 747. I think he moves well in terms of his size. I don't think he's rangy feet-wise necessarily. His balance, I certainly thought was much improved. Went back and looked at some of the tape over the weekend. He looks much more improved in 2022 than he did in 2021. So that's encouraging. I think he's a little bit high cut. I think he sets up way too high. We talked about this in the OnlyFins chat. I think he can lose the leverage battle. He can allow people inside him and into him and onto his breastplate. I think he's on the ground a lot, which I don't like. But, he rocked up at the Senior Bowl and was outstanding before he got injured and sat out days 2 and 3. But he was fantastic on day 1. I think he's very much a scheme-specific right tackle. I think it was a bit I think managing his weight is going to be an issue. I hear he refused to weigh in at the Ohio State Pro Day, which I think is a bit of a concern. I think, look, generally, he's a solid player. I think he needs to continue that improvement with some of his kind of reaction skills. Look, as a run game right tackle, he's an absolute monster. He can engulf you, and I think that he could certainly be a starter in the NFL and a starter for the Dolphins. He doesn't ordinarily fit. He's certainly not scheme specific in terms of being a pure zone guy. Avila, look, he's just I think he's just a really, really solid player. He was the starting left tackle as a sophomore. In high school, he was recruited as a left tackle. But he's just big. He's physical. He's got he has got bricks for hands, concrete hands. You watch him against Mazzie Smith, who I absolutely love, the Michigan interior defensive lineman. I think he's a top 15 guy. I think he's it was mano-y-mano. It was a great battle. He always looks for work. I love that. Started at least one game at 4 different positions over the last 3 years, so everywhere except the position he played at high school, left tackle. Most of his snaps came at center, but obviously legitimate position flex. And you think to yourself, look, Connor Williams was excellent as a center last year, but had some, even as the season went on, still had some issues with the snap. Do you move Connor Williams back to the left guard and put Avila at center? Do you just keep Williams where he is and move Avila in and battle him with Liam Eichenberg? But again, it goes back to what we talked about at the top of the show. I just don't think that the Dolphins feel like they're done with the draft capital that they've invested in Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg. I just don't think they're ready to give up on that. And, because ultimately that would be Chris Greer saying that in 2000 I had 3 first-round draft picks and I blew 2 of them, and one guy is probably one hit away from from me being 0 for 3 when I was supposed to rebuild the team. And the Bengals have been to an AFC Championship and a Super Bowl, and they were doing exactly the same as I was with less picks. But I like Avila. I would end up, I do not, under any circumstances, think the Dolphins are going to move away from Austin Jackson at right tackle. So for me, it would probably end up being Avila. But I'd want to keep Tua healthy, and I'd probably draft Jones if he was there. Chances are, I don't think he'll be there, and I think he'll be left with the decision on Avila. But I suspect that they'll have other names because God knows Chris Guerrero's got no idea what he's doing when it comes to offensive linemen. So you could see them draft. You could see them draft a Nick Salvadieri of Old Dominion and go around early on him, or I mean, God only knows what they're thinking at that position. I talked about it earlier on. They like Braden Daniels. They like the Bergeron kid at Syracuse. You're gonna have to move over from left tackle to the right side. But yeah, Lord alone knows what they're going to do. So we'll see. It'll be very interesting. But yeah, I would. Those two guys I think are kind of in the wheelhouse. But I don't think that Jones. One, I don't think Jones makes it, and two, I just don't think Greer just such a black spot for him that I just can't see it.
Chris, same question. Those two guys are on the clock. You've already decided that's where you're going to go on the offensive line. You getting the left guard that's going to play for 10 years, or the behemoth right tackle that's going to play for 10 years? Because they both have that same look as, long-serving pros.
Yeah. I'd be surprised. I've said this several times. I'd be surprised if DeJuan Jones misses a start at right tackle for the next decade. He just has that look like he's a pro. He's going to start right away. He's going to start as a rookie, getting week one, and I hate to say this because we've said this about other guys, and it's like we were just talking about this earlier. Jawan James, he played 49 games in college. And then he had an injury-riddled pro career, and his career is definitely cut short because of injuries. I remember when Jake Long was drafted by Jeff Ireland. One of the things Jeff Ireland literally said about him day one when he's commenting on the pick is he's like, listen, you can't hurt this guy with an axe. Well, somebody brought out an axe, because he was an injury played career. But I don't know, something about the heft of DeJuan Jones. You're just like, this guy is going to start for a long time. He does seem very solid. I do see the concerns there. I don't think that he or Avila are going to make it. I think that they've got too many fans among people who, are, if not very plugged into NFL people, all know what they're doing. I'll just say it that way. They've got big fans among people that know what they're doing, and it makes me think that they're not going to make it to 51, and we're going to be staring at a situation where we don't have access to either one of those dudes. And so I think that we're talking about a trade up scenario. I think considering right tackle and left, and then to a lesser extent right. I believe personally, to a lesser extent, left guard are the last huge holes remaining on the team. To me, it's a no-brainer to go up and to trade a future pick, or even the third round, the number 84 pick, and make sure that you've got 1,000 snaps coming from this draft. And I think that's what we need. Our window's now. So yeah, I would trade up and get one of those guys. Now, a guy that is kind of popular that I'm trying to see it. I've given him like second, third chances, and I'm just not seeing is Matthew Bergeron of Syracuse. He's got fans out there. I know there are people serious people even that like him a lot, and I respect them, and that's why I keep giving him chance after chance. But I'm just wondering, as I get through the tape. There's something about him that I know he doesn't have a questionable frame. I know he does have good wingspan and long arms, but even so, there's something about him that's like, I don't know that I really trust you at tackle as a pass protector. I don't know that he has the physical qualities to be a good pass protector. And if you're going to take Matthew Bergeron, I mean, there's so much to like, and I get that, especially in the run game. But you have to get through well, okay, but why was he so awful against Florida State toward the end of the year? Why was he bad against Clemson? Why was he kind of, a little iffy? I mean, basically, if you just took his last 5 games of the year and stacked them up, and like this was your process, is just a like, okay, well, I'm going to take the last handful of games that a guy played and take a look at him. You take a look at Matthew Bergeron in those last 5 games, and you'd be like, I don't think so. Like, and he was. I mean, granted, Jared Verse of Florida State is a quality player, but he was also clearly outclassing Matthew Bergeron at every step of the way. And then there were players on Florida State that were not quality players that were also outclassing him. So that one's one I would be nervous about. Paris Johnson, Broderick Jones, Peter Skoronski, they're going to go too high. There are a lot of people that are very, very adamant that Anton Harrison of Oklahoma is going to go too high. And I can see why. I'm not comfortable with, personally. I mean, maybe you might call me crazy. I'm not all that comfortable with Osiris Torrance on the inside. I don't think he's worth. I don't think he's worth what he's being rated. And so I'm not sure that the pick is worth it up there. The guys that are really worth it, you go back to it again and again. It's like, okay, Steve Avila and DeJuan Jones, and you're like, well, if those are the guys that everybody, if it's so obvious that those are worth it, then they're not going to be there, and that's what the point I keep coming back to. They're going to have to trade up. They're going to have to trade up for one of these guys. I do think DeJuan Jones could play in this system. I think there's a trade-off between your frame and your pure mobility in this system, in wide zone. He ran wide zone plays all over the place in Ohio State. You don't have to look far to see a lot of tape of him on all 22 running wide zone plays, and he did well with it. And at times he looks like a cheat code. I think that he's young, so it's not surprising that he's still making leaps and bounds year over year. I think he's going to continue to do that. There's some very criticizable aspects of his game with his feet and his hips. His feet are all over the place. They still, they still click together. They still, like, he takes too big of a step with his second step. I mean, he doesn't, he opens his hips too early a lot. He gets away with a lot because he's huge and he's got a massive wingspan. And once he gets those hands on you, it is over. But the value with him, I think, is almost in the fact that he is still making unforced errors in technique because he's only 21 years old. And that he is going to get better as a pro. So what's it going to look like when he does stop making unforced errors in technique? Or one would think that he would eventually. I mean, it's not like he's a 24-year-old college player and he's still doing this. He's only 21. So I think that the high or the ceiling there has to be pretty massive on him, and that's what I would focus on if I were taking him. But yeah, I think that he does have good instincts, unlike Austin Jackson. Something that we notice about him, even going back to college, is this guy never seemed to have instincts like an offensive lineman. He never did, and it never looked like it. We were discussing this earlier. Would he have been better as a ball carrier? Or would he have been better as a defensive end or a defensive tackle? I really think that is the case. But DeJuan Jones has instincts. He has technique in some regards. He has bad technique in other regards. And I think that you could fix those bad techniques. But the value here is not just, we often fall into this trap with the offensive lineman. This goes for everybody. We often fall in this trap of, like, we're looking for, it's the PFF influence. How many pressures did you let up? Versus your overall and such. And we fall into that a little bit, and it's like, then you step back and realize, oh wait, are we really evaluating these guys based on like 2% of their plays?
Yeah.
Like what about the other 98%? Like that's, you have to think about that. And what I notice on Jones is on a lot of his plays, it's not just that. I mean, he only let up 5 pressures on the year. So yeah, from a statistic analytic profile standpoint, he's magical. But on the plays where he's not, he maintains a lot of space for his quarterback. You know, like he is able to defend a lot of space and keep a moat around his quarterback. And what that does is, like, you know, don't just think about like the 2% of plays or the 3% or even 4 or 5% of the plays where they screw up. Okay. Think about the other plays where the guy that he's facing isn't going to get to the quarterback even if he's on a 10-second timer. You know, like think about those plays. Think about the plays where he is buried a guy into the ground. And I have a tweet up with a video of, like, I think there must be at least 24 plays in there, and a bunch of them he is just burying these guys in pass pro into the ground. It doesn't matter how long the play lasts; they're not getting to the quarterback, right?
Yeah, if your first move doesn't work on him and you're stuck in his frame, it's over. You know,
it's over, and
it's already 3-4 seconds, and you're still standing there.
Yeah, you're still standing there. So imagine all the space that is preserved for the quarterback during that time, you know, and imagine if everybody else is doing their job too, you know, and all that space that's preserved for the quarterback. And not only that, but now he's got safe harbor, you know, now he's got a space where he can start to steer into and feel safe about, or a lane to scramble over into and feel safe about it. And I think that we don't think enough about the upside of those plays and what a good quarterback can do when he has that, you know, on his backside, on his blind side that way. And so that's the value that I see there. That's why I keep pumping it and being like, you know what, just go up and trade for the guy. It's the easiest answer in the book, you know? And I think Steve Avila would also be the easiest answer in the book at the left guard position, because Simon described him beautifully. He is that kind of player at a left guard. And either way, you'd be improving your line tremendously by getting either player. But, you know, look for easy answers, man. You know, like, that's, to me, you know, just there. It's almost stupefying. You're like, there's things right in front of our face. You know, look for the easy answers, and that's why I keep pumping that.
Can I just give the yin to Chris's yang here on Osiris Torrance, who I know the Dolphins had a meeting with at the Combine, right? He is the sort of guy, and Chris talks about the stuff that's right in front of your face. Yeah, Mike McDaniel, as we know, kind of the genius, you know, he's the kind of the, when you do the GIF on Twitter and he's got all the mathematical things in front of him, that's Mike McDaniel, right? Torrance played center, okay, at Louisiana Lafayette. He was responsible for second protections. He adjusted the blocking mechanism versus fronts, and then he moved to guard, and then he transferred to Florida. But apparently all the intel out of the staff that worked with him, both at Florida and at Louisiana Lafayette, said that he essentially ranges somewhere between kind of, you know, Alan Turing and Will Hunting on the geniusometer. You know, once he's seen a fruit or he's seen a structure or a pressure path, he's got it banked, and that shows up on tape, right? I cannot think for a second that Mike McDaniel wouldn't sit in the meeting with this kind of genius, this 3.8 GPA student, and think, wow, this kid has got something special that I can really work with. You know, he's a kind of a craftsman in, you know, like the wolf in sheep's clothing. He's a kind of a craftsman in bully's clothing in a way. He's very talky. I went back and watched the Lafayette tape and how he's worked to refine kind of issues within his game, you know, working on the usage of his offhand in the run game, how to block the concept rather than just, you know, whomping into players. You know, I think he's kind of got that intersection where sort of he's just a master of the art of what he does. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't just get by like so many college linemen get by on just sort of physical prowess. He's actually got the sort of the intelligence to understand that. Like, you talk about a great boxer, like we talked about Gennady Golovkin a few years ago about how he was able to corner the boxing ring because his understanding of angles was so good that he just never let up for 3 rounds, 6 rounds, 9 rounds, 12 rounds, however long a fight went. He never gave his opponent a single second because his understanding of angles in the ring just shut people down the whole time. And that's what Torrance does. He's balanced. He plays with balance when he initiates contact. He plays with balance when he absorbs contact. His base is really good. You know, he's not he's not Clubber Lang out there. He's not out there delivering death blows, but and occasionally you just want to see your guy throw someone out of the club. But he's so subtle in terms of how he understands position, how he understands the little technical adjustments that I think will serve him best at the next level. He talked to Brandon Thorne, the very respected offensive line guy, and talked about how the Florida coaches wanted him to restart his feet on contact, and you watch him at the end of the year, and I think that's what he's doing. Look, he gave up no sacks at Florida. He only allowed 8 hurries in the entire season, despite the fact that he went from the Sun Belt to the SEC. No bedding in period whatsoever. The last 3 seasons as a starter, bounced between positions, guard and center. He had 0 sacks, 1 hit, and 14 hurries across 1,082 true pass blocking snaps per PFF, right? That means he conceded a pressure on 1.2% of his college snaps. I mean, that is pretty special. I just think that, you look at a guy who's got that sort of intelligence and understanding of line play, and somebody like Mike McDaniel, when he's in a room with this guy for 15, 20 minutes, just thinks to himself, oof, I'm a details guy, and this kid is a details guy. He is I think he's probably out of the Dolphins' reach, but I think he's a very interesting player and prospect who the head coach will just be thinking, that's an itch I might want to scratch if this is a really good player, I think.
So, do you think he goes to center? Do you think he stays at right guard and Robert Hunt moves to right tackle? What are you imagining?
I mean, could you imagine him at center and then just shift Connor Williams to left guard and keep Rob Hunt where he is?
Can Tua throw over him is the problem, I say.
It's a pretty.
It's not that he's not that big, or he's
6'5". He measured in a 6'5.25" at the combine.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, Michael Dieter was the backup center. He was 6'7".
Well, Dieter was 6'7".
Yeah. I think that as a center, like a sort of a Rodney Hudson type of center, maybe.
Connor Williams must be 6'5", mustn't he?
Yeah. He was a left tackle. So I mean, yeah, he's big.
Yeah.
Michael Dieter 6'6". Yeah, I had no idea he was that big, because I've been standing next to Michael Dieter I guess because he's not that good. I've been standing next to him for 4 years, and I kept looking at him like, he's not that big. He's 6'6".
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, do you move him? As a move guy, like as he, well, I guess either he would move or somebody else would move, right? Because he moves to center. He moves back to center. Connor Williams moves to left guard. You've very much solidified a big area of the offensive line. Done a lot of good there. Or you move Rob Hunt to right tackle.
And of course, who did Torrance play with at Louisiana Lafayette?
Absolutely.
Who did he play? He played next to Rob Hunt as center.
He played next to Rob Hunt.
So that's obviously the fix if we're moving. Because I was going to say 2 scenarios to look forward to is maybe moving Connor Williams to left guard and then finding a center. Is that who you would target at 51?
Well, but the thing is, look, he started 47 games the last 4 years, and he's got double-digit starts at both guard spots. So I don't think he's beyond the realms of possibility he can play left guard as well. So, to me, it's just a plug-and-play day one starter. He's got the play strength, the body control, the balance, the understanding of angles, the understanding of the small, refined bits. To make him, I think he's out of our reach. But if he just started to tumble, he might be the sort of guy that McDaniel's just like tapping Greer on the leg and going, just go for him, just get him.
But don't you get the feeling that McDaniel doesn't want any of this?
Well, maybe. I mean, who knows what McDaniel wants? It's
well, yeah, right. But I mean, like when he was describing this story, about he got here to Miami. And he's sitting in a room with all the staff, and all the staff are like, "Hey, we need to spend resources on the offensive line. We need to get this going. We need to get this fixed." And he's clearly outvoted by all these people. And so, what does he do? He spends like 13 hours in the film room cutting up a tape to convince everybody that they're wrong. And that that sticks with me. And then what else sticks with me is I did this big thread on Twitter. I talked about they took Aaron Banks in San Francisco in the second round, and that's not a prototype for this style of wide zone offense. He's a big player, not very fast, not very athletic, and so he's asked about that, and something that still sticks with me about what he said there, which was basically like, hey, if you can engineer them for me, I'd prefer them all to be 6'10" and 400 pounds. But something else that he said is something he's like, well, usually we're not taking guys all the way up in the second round. He's one of those guys that's of the old school belief that you don't take linemen that high, period. I can tell. And maybe he might make exceptions for the tackle position, because I think everybody kind of does, but including in San Francisco. But like he seems to be I would bet money on this, good money, that he's like taking an offensive lineman, an interior offensive lineman in the second round, in the first round. Give me a defensive end. Give me a playmaker. Give me, you know what I mean? Like, I kind of feel like he's one of those guys.
Now, let's say that the move might be to move Robert Hunt to right tackle. I got a couple of.
That's not going to happen though. They'd have announced that already.
Yeah, I know that they've said it like over and over again, that they kind of feel as if Robert Hunt is the better player at right guard and will be a top performer in this league at right guard, and they have no interest in moving him. But let's say that that's the break glass in case of emergency option. I see a couple of guys, and I want to ask you about two guys in particular that I looked at today, Simon, and if you know anything about them. Anthony Bradford looks to me like a plug and play right guard if that was the move. Okay, although he played some left tackle. I don't think he went playing tackle in the NFL. He's an absolute mauler, good mover at right guard. If you could talk about Anthony Bradford out of LSU, and another guy that I looked at, and I don't know if you're versed on him, but he had a pretty good college career, and that's TJ Bass, left guard for Oregon.
Yeah.
Both guys, TJ Bass and to a lesser extent, Anthony Bradford, because there's something going on with Anthony Bradford where he was benched for parts of games, and I don't know what that's about. But if you know anything about those two guys, what do you think of them as prospects? Because I think they're right then in that wheelhouse for that 84th pick.
Yeah, I think Bradford's a guy that they interviewed at the combine. He was one of their interviews at the combine. I think he's a big guy. He's 6'4", he's 332 pounds. He's out of LSU, obviously. Played in the national championship team with the Joe Burrow team, was part of that recruiting class with Derek Stingley and those guys, and actually Siaki Ika, the Baylor defensive tackle, another guy that we'll potentially talk about in coming shows. He's broad, he's big, he's got a big mass. When he gets his hands on you, it's game over. He's got some anchor versus power inside, certainly in pass protection, which I like. He kind of stays square, keeps his hips, keeps busy, keeps moving. He's a good finisher. Was a right tackle in high school. Played a little bit of left tackle at LSU, but he's played mostly at right guard. Actually, he's also got some weight issues. I think he's a little bit top heavy, which then means he gets a bit out over his skis. You watch him against Tennessee when he played left tackle, he was all over the shop, and especially kind of getting out, bending at the waist. He's only had might be 16, might be 17 starts, but obviously, 2-year starter at LSU, right, primarily a right guard in a zone-based offense. I think he's best in that phone booth area, actually, because he's just, he can move people because he's kind of a sheer sort of force of physical nature. And who was the other guy that you said? Was it
TJ Bass of Oregon?
Oh yeah, TJ Bass. He's a 6-year guy, I think. Bass. I mean, this is a guy that's been around since, I think he went to college in like 2009 or something, and this is like his 18th year or something. I mean, he is. I don't think he's particularly athletic. He's 6'4", he's 317 pounds. I mean, he ran a 5.48 40. I mean,
that's slower than DeJuan Jones, who's like the biggest offensive lineman ever.
that's Rich Eisen territory. He's got some grip strength. He can, he's a good awareness guy. Like, you look at him with combo blocks and those sorts of things. He's fierce. He'll really finish a guy, but look, he doesn't have the athletic ability. He's not particularly long. I think he's inconsistent. He's older. I think he'll be 24, maybe 25. Obviously played left tackle, but he's going to have to move inside. He was a JUCO guy. I just don't think he's athletic enough to play that position. But he's got some sort of in the phone booth again, sort of heavy hands, kind of nasty sort of kick-ass mentality to him. I don't think he's a zone guy, Alf. Actually, I think he's probably more a gap scheme guy. So yeah, he's not somebody that I think the Dolphins would necessarily have on their radar.
All right. Before we move off of Anthony Bradford, do you have anything on that, on why he was pulled out of some games? Because there's a game in particular a couple of years
he
ago.
was injured. It was an injury thing.
It was an injury because he was standing
injured
next to the coach. He was absolutely destroying that Mississippi State defensive front.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden he gets pulled and he's standing next to the coach. So it was an injury?
Yeah, he had some injuries in 2021 and it lingered through 2022 spring practices. And I believe he re-injured it then during the season. So I think that's why. And he just had to take plays off, I think, because he was just sort of toughing it out, but just had to take plays off.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like some coach decision or something.
I don't believe so. It's certainly not something that I've heard was a coach decision. I have heard that he was carrying an injury during the season.
All right. Chris, you got any pet players? I brought two to the table.
Yeah, it is actually interesting because we talked about like Osiris Torrance at right guard, and I've watched him at right guard, and I have no doubt that he's a heady player. He's a very lively player too. Like, I like his energy quite a bit. But if I've looked at a guy that I'm like, that is just a solid right guard that could probably play in the NFL at that position, but he's got virtually the same athletic profile as Osiris Torrance. I think Tayshawn Manning of Kentucky. I think he's just a very solid player. He's put together. He executes well. This is not a guy that you might not even draft him at all, right? But I think that he is a solid player that could play above his station. A guy that I would probably stay away from, who's, depending on which draft service you're looking at or media sources you're looking at, is the Florida guy, Richard. Is it Gorage? I don't know how to Gorage. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I don't see him staying at tackle. I don't think that's working for him. The problem is he's one of these classic guys that's like, well, he can't play tackle at this level, so we're going to move him inside a guard, and I think that's going to be even worse for him, just based on his makeup as a player. I think that Chandler Zavala has a lot of fans. I think that there's a good reason he has a lot of fans. I think that he's a solid player. I think if you're going down a little bit, at the tackle spot, we've talked about Wanye Morris of Oklahoma. I think he's played right tackle throughout. I think he's a very solid player. I think he ran like a 5.10 and was grabbing his hamstring during the last 8 yards of it. Like he was, he's got some athleticism to him. He's got good frame. He strikes me as such a Chris Greer pick, and I'm not trying to be critical on that. I just I think that he's a big school championship caliber program. I think that he played the position that you would want him at for the Dolphins. He's got the frame. I think Chris Greer is ultimately kind of a prototype guy. And so, he strikes me as a very Chris Greer type of pick, almost like sitting at pick 84. There's Wanye Morris, take him, done, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I would keep an eye on him. Now I don't think that he's a premium prospect. If I go to sleep well at night if, say, the Ohio State guy, Devon Jones, is the right tackle, or Anton Harrison. I think that Carter Warren is going to go a lot higher. Actually, I was just seeing that. I've been saying, I've been like, oh, I think Carter Warren. He's one of the few that I trust, and that now I find out that the NFL are absolutely onto him. So he would fit right in that day 2 area for us. But as Simon said, you're moving him from left tackle to right. Who knows what happens there? But I think he can play. I think he is a quality player. He is a starting tackle in the NFL. I would be surprised if he is not. And then some guy that I keep going a little bit back and forth on is and in a way pretty recently has started to make a lot of sense. When I first started watching Braden Daniels of Utah, and I'm watching his left tackle tape, this year, that's what he played. And I'm looking at it and I'm kind of, he's really jumpy. He's really explosive. He explodes everywhere he goes. He's very agile. It's very impressive to watch him. But he's also, there's some technical issues there. There's maybe sometimes getting a foot wrong or stepping in the wrong direction. Everybody else is blocking down this way, and he, takes his first step the wrong way and stuff like that. And it's not working out at left tackle. He probably didn't have great metrics there for those that pay attention to metrics. Then I went back and watched, the previous year because he's been at Utah for 5 years now. So I started watching him in the previous year. He was playing right tackle, and he was playing really well. And he is a very explosive guy. I think that. He's 33-inch arms, so it's kind of in the gray area for a right tackle. 6'4", 294 pounds. I kind of wonder if you just take him as an offensive lineman, and he could play right tackle for you. He could play left guard for you. Because actually, if you go back to 2001 or 21. With Utah, those were the two positions he played. He played left guard and he played right tackle. I think if you look at him as an offensive lineman, somebody that you're brushing up, you might have something there because there's some natural gifts there that you're not finding with other players, particularly in this scheme. And I know we do want to find guys that play in this scheme. I think, or that are cut for this scheme. And, maybe sometimes you make an exception because it's like, hey, we need a starter right now. Like I keep talking about the Ohio State guy. We need a starter right now. No, he's not cut. He's not built on the drafting table, or he's not drawn up on the drafting table for this scheme exactly, but he can play. And that's what we know. That's what we need right now. We know that he can play. This would be a guy, Braden Daniels of Utah would be a guy that's like, okay, he is kind of, like you drafted it up to have this kind of mobility, this kind of explosiveness, this kind of agility. And I think he would make a really interesting pick. I don't know about 84 or whatever, but I don't know what price tag the NFL are looking at on him, but he's an interesting player to me.
I think if I was going to take 3 tackles out and 3 guards, I'd be looking at Tyler Steen of Alabama, kind of lower guys, Carter Warren, that Chris has mentioned at Pitt, and the kid at Old Dominion, Nick Saldivieri, who I think is a really interesting player. I think he's got some talent. I think you could play him at multiple positions. I like him. I think he's got that the athletic control, scheme diverse player. I think he can play multiple positions on the offensive line. And then I think at guard, away from the guys that you mentioned, again, Chris mentioned Chandler Zavala, who I really like. Look, Emil Ekiyor at Alabama is a really good player, battle-tested. Sidney Sow of Eastern Michigan, Nick Broker of Ole Miss I like. And then there's a kid at UCLA, Antonio Maffei, who I think is a really good player, a really underrated player. And I think he's going to be a day one star. He reminds me of Aaron Banks quite a lot. The guy who, ironically enough, plays left guard for the 49ers. And then centers, like we talked about, I mean, he goes down, you just look at the list: Tittman, Schmitz, Whippler, Scruggs, Oluwatimi, Forsyth, Stromberg, Schmidt, Jarrett Patterson and Notre Dame. There's some quality players there. I think that, you could be guard converts as well. So the talent is there, but as we go back to what we started on an hour ago, do the Dolphins really A, care enough, and B, know what they're looking at anyway? That's how I think I'd round that off.
Do they know what they're looking at anyway?
Well, Mike McDaniel was seen at the UFC talking to Aaron Donald, so maybe that's the thing. They're going to play Aaron Donald at left guard, and he's going to play both ways, and everything's going to be all right.
You know what? If he plays both ways, then that contract will be worth it.
Yeah. All right, we're going to have to call it there. That's an hour and a half on the offensive line for them not to take anybody on day 2. But we'll be watching on day 2 to see if any of these guys actually drop to them. My favorite Steve Beal, I think I've made it known from the beginning. I don't think he'll make it. I think he's in that short list at 51 for me. All right, that's it. The next time we talk to you, we will be talking about defensive line, defensive tackle. But till then.
Thanks for listening to 3 Yards Per Carry. You can subscribe via iTunes, on Podbean, or your usual podcast provider.